2 years after Frank's heart attack, Rolling Hills Ranch had transformed into something extraordinary. What began as a desperate arrangement between a lonely rancher and a struggling single mother had evolved into a thriving family enterprise that had captured the attention of the entire surrounding community. Maria stood in the expanded ranch store, organizing fresh produce and baked goods that now supplied 3 local restaurants and the weekend farmers market. Her business skills, honed through necessity during her difficult years in the city, had found perfect application in managing the ranch's growing commercial ventures. Frank's extensive knowledge of agriculture combined with Maria's entrepreneurial drive had created opportunities neither had imagined possible. The success story had reached far beyond their property lines. A local newspaper reporter had written a feature article about their unusual family arrangement, which was picked up by regional publications and eventually caught the attention of a national magazine focused on rural life and family stories. The article, titled "Love Grows Here, the Ranch Family That Proves Home is Where the Heart Is," brought visitors from across the country who wanted to see Rolling Hills Ranch for themselves. Carlos, now 11, had become the ranch's unofficial tour guide, confidently explaining their operation to visitors with a maturity that consistently impressed adults. His passion for veterinary science had grown stronger with each passing season, and Dr. Martinez, the local veterinarian, had begun taking Carlos along on some of his ranch calls to observe and learn. "This is Buttercup," Carlos would tell visitors, stroking the elderly mare's neck affectionately. "She taught me that animals understand love better than most people do. When we first came here, I was scared of everything. But Buttercup showed me that being gentle doesn't mean being weak." Elena had blossomed into a confident 9-year-old artist whose sketches of ranch life were now sold in the ranch store to tourists. Her talent had caught the attention of the local high school art teacher, who visited regularly to provide advanced instruction. Elena's dream was to become a professional artist who specialized in capturing the beauty of rural life and the bond between humans and animals. Miguel, at 7, had appointed himself the ranch's chief animal welfare officer. His special connection with the younger animals was remarkable to witness. Calves, foals, and even baby chicks seemed drawn to his patient, gentle presence. Frank often said that Miguel had inherited Sarah's gift for healing touch, though the boy had never met Frank's late wife. Frank himself had made a remarkable recovery, though he moved more carefully now and relied increasingly on his family to handle the physical demands of ranch work. His role had evolved into teacher and wisdom keeper, sharing decades of knowledge about land management, animal care, and the subtle rhythms of rural life with his eager students. The ranch now operated multiple income streams that reflected each family member's strengths and interests. Maria's tortillas and tamales had become so popular that she had hired 2 women from town to help meet demand. The vegetable garden, expanded under Frank's guidance and Maria's business planning, now provided produce to restaurants 30 miles away. Carlos had convinced Frank to start a small breeding program for gentle horses suitable for children's riding lessons. Elena's artwork had evolved into a small business creating custom ranch portraits for other farming families. Even Miguel contributed by helping Frank conduct educational tours for school groups, his natural enthusiasm for animals making him an excellent teacher for younger children. But the true measure of their success went far beyond financial prosperity. The transformation was most visible in the children's confidence, academic achievement, and deep sense of belonging. Carlos consistently earned top grades while participating in 4-H programs and the school's science fair, where his projects on animal behavior had won several awards. Elena had been invited to display her artwork at the county fair, where her detailed sketches of ranch life earned recognition from professional artists visiting the exhibit. Her pieces now hung in several local businesses, including Dr. Rodriguez's medical clinic and the town library. Miguel had surprised everyone by emerging as a natural leader among children his age. When his teacher organized a class visit to Rolling Hills Ranch, Miguel conducted the tour with such enthusiasm and knowledge that the teacher requested regular field trips for future classes. Frank had never imagined that his simple decision to place an advertisement for ranch help would result in such profound changes to his life and property. The lonely old man who had rattled around in an empty house had been replaced by a patriarch surrounded by the laughter and energy of children who called him grandfather with genuine love. The most touching evidence of their bond came during community emergencies, when their unusual family consistently demonstrated the depth of their commitment to each other. When a neighbor's barn fire threatened to spread to surrounding properties, the entire Santos Morrison family worked together through the night, helping to save animals and equipment. Maria coordinated food and supplies for the firefighters, while Frank provided expertise about controlling flames around farm buildings. Carlos helped move frightened animals to safety, Elena comforted younger children whose families were affected, and even Miguel contributed by distributing water bottles to the exhausted volunteer firefighters. Their response to crisis had earned them deep respect throughout the community. People began referring to them simply as the Morrison family, recognizing that their bonds transcended legal definitions and were rooted in genuine care and commitment. The adoption papers Frank had presented that Christmas morning had been finalized without complications, officially establishing the legal framework for what everyone already knew in their hearts. Maria Santos Morrison and her 3 children were Frank's chosen family, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. Local lawyer James Patterson, who had handled the adoption proceedings, later told colleagues that he had never seen a more clear-cut case of a family created purely through love and mutual need. The children's desire to take Frank's name had been wholehearted, and Maria's gratitude for the security it provided was evident in every conversation. The ranch's reputation for healing and renewal had begun attracting other families facing difficulties. Frank and Maria found themselves informally counseling single parents, elderly people considering shared living arrangements, and families struggling with various transitions. Their example of creating family bonds beyond traditional relationships provided hope and practical guidance for others. Dr. Rodriguez often referred patients to spend time at Rolling Hills Ranch, recognizing the therapeutic value of the peaceful environment and the Morrison family's natural ability to make people feel welcomed and valued. Several families had moved to the area specifically to be part of the supportive community that had developed around the ranch. The local school district had begun using Rolling Hills Ranch as an outdoor classroom, where students could learn about agriculture, animal care, and environmental stewardship in a hands-on setting. Frank and Maria had developed educational programs that connected academic subjects to practical ranch activities, making learning engaging and memorable for children from urban backgrounds. As spring arrived again at Rolling Hills Ranch, marking 3 full years since Maria and her children had first driven through those rusted gates, Frank sat on his front porch watching his family prepare for another busy season. Carlos was in the barn learning to assist with a mare's pregnancy, Elena was sketching the new wildflowers blooming in the pasture, and Miguel was helping Maria plant an expanded herb garden. The physical improvements to the ranch were evident everywhere. Fresh paint brightened all the buildings, new fencing enclosed expanded pastures, and Maria's flower gardens provided color around every structure. But the most significant changes were invisible, the transformation of 4 broken people into a strong, loving family unit that had created something beautiful from their shared commitment to each other. Frank often thought about Sarah during these peaceful moments, imagining how delighted she would be to see the ranch filled with children's laughter and the purposeful activity of a thriving family business. He felt certain that Sarah's spirit approved of the family they had built and the love that now filled every corner of the property she had helped him create. Visitors frequently asked Frank about the secret to their success, wanting to understand how such an unlikely family arrangement had resulted in such obvious happiness and prosperity. His answer was always the same, delivered with the gentle smile that had first welcomed Maria and her children on that uncertain morning years ago. Love isn't complicated, Frank would explain. You just have to be willing to choose it every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. We decided to love each other as family, and everything else grew from that simple decision. As evening approached and the family gathered for dinner around the big kitchen table, Frank looked at each beloved face and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Carlos was explaining his latest project with animal genetics, Elena was showing off her newest artwork, Miguel was recounting the day's adventures with the baby animals, and Maria was orchestrating the conversation with the patient skill of a mother who had learned to appreciate every moment of normal family chaos. The ranch house that had once echoed with loneliness now vibrated with life, purpose, and unconditional love. Outside, the animals settled peacefully for the night, secure in their well-maintained homes. Beyond the pastures, the mountains stood eternal and protective, witnesses to the miracle of healing that had transformed Rolling Hills Ranch into something far greater than the sum of its parts. Frank knew that whatever challenges the future might bring, this family would face them together with the strength that came from choosing love over fear, hope over despair, and commitment over convenience. They had proven that families are built through daily acts of caring, that home is created through shared purpose, and that the deepest love often grows between people who choose each other rather than those who simply share blood. As the last light faded from the sky and the family prepared for another peaceful night on the ranch that had become their sanctuary, Frank whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude for the advertisement that had changed all their lives, for the courage Maria had shown in trusting a stranger with her children's future, and for the boundless capacity of the human heart to create family from love, determination, and hope. Rolling Hills Ranch had become exactly what it was always meant to be, a place where love grew stronger than any obstacle, where broken people became whole through caring for each other, and where the simple phrase, "Our Papa loves you," held the power to heal wounds that had seemed permanent and create joy that would last for generations. 6 months into their new life at Rolling Hills Ranch, Maria stood in the kitchen before dawn, preparing breakfast for the growing family that now included Frank as an honorary grandfather. The aroma of fresh coffee and bacon filled the air as she watched through the window. In the early morning light, she could see Carlos leading Buttercup toward the pasture, his small frame dwarfed by the gentle mare he had learned to care for with remarkable skill. The transformation in her oldest son amazed Maria daily. Carlos had arrived at the ranch withdrawn and anxious, carrying the weight of being the man of the family at only 8 years old. Now he moved with confidence around the animals, his Spanish mixing freely with English as he chatted to the horses about everything from school to his dreams of becoming a veterinarian. Frank emerged from the barn, moving more slowly than when they had first arrived. At 72, the daily ranch work was becoming harder, but his spirits had lifted dramatically with the Santos family's presence. The children had given him a new sense of purpose, and Maria's efficient management of the household had freed him to focus on what he loved most, working with the animals and maintaining the land his grandfather had first settled in 1952. "Good morning, Papa Frank," Elena called out as she skipped toward the house, her arms full of eggs from the morning collection. The title had emerged naturally after their first month at the ranch, when Frank had helped Elena overcome her fear of the rooster by patiently teaching her how to move confidently among the chickens. Frank's weathered face broke into a smile every time he heard that name. Papa Frank had become his most treasured title, more meaningful than any accomplishment from his years of successful ranching. The love in those children's voices when they called him their chosen grandfather filled a hollow space in his heart that had been empty since Sarah's death. Miguel, now 5 and growing taller every week, charged out of the house wearing miniature work boots that Frank had bought him in town. The boy had appointed himself assistant ranch manager, following Frank everywhere and copying his every movement with serious determination. "Papa Frank, I fed the baby calf already," Miguel announced proudly. "She drank all her milk and tried to lick my face." "That's because she thinks you're part of her family now," Frank replied, lifting Miguel onto his shoulders for the walk to the house. Animals know when someone cares about them. Maria watched this daily scene with deep gratitude. Her children had not only found safety and stability at Rolling Hills Ranch, but they had discovered something precious she had feared they might never experience again: the security of being genuinely loved and valued by someone outside their immediate family. The changes went beyond emotional healing. Carlos had started bringing home excellent grades, his teacher noting how much more focused and confident he had become. Elena had joined the school's art program and spent hours drawing pictures of ranch life, her talent emerging in detailed sketches of horses and farm scenes. Miguel had grown 3 inches and lost the pale, thin appearance of malnutrition that had worried Maria in the city. Frank, too, had experienced transformation. His arthritis bothered him less when he had enthusiastic helpers eager to assist with every task. His blood pressure had improved according to Dr. Rodriguez, who attributed the change to reduced stress and increased happiness. Most importantly, Frank had rediscovered the joy of sharing his knowledge with eager students who hung on his every word about animal care and land management. "Maria makes the best tortillas in 3 counties, Frank boasted to everyone in town, his pride in his chosen family evident to all who knew him. The local grocery store had even asked Maria to supply fresh tortillas and tamales for their weekend market, creating a small but growing source of additional income. But the true test of their new life came during a crisis that struck in late autumn. Frank had been feeling tired for several weeks, attributing his fatigue to the changing season and increased ranch work as winter approached. One morning, Maria found him collapsed in the barn, unconscious beside Buttercup's stall. The ambulance ride to the regional hospital was the longest 40 minutes of Maria's life. As she sat beside Frank's unconscious form, holding his calloused hand, she realized how completely their lives had intertwined. Frank was no longer just their employer or landlord, he had become the children's beloved grandfather and her trusted partner in creating a stable life. Dr. Rodriguez met them at the emergency room with a grave expression. Frank had suffered a mild heart attack, complicated by dangerously high blood pressure that had likely been building for months. He would recover, but he needed surgery and several weeks of careful rest. "He's going to be fine," Dr. Rodriguez assured Maria as they stood outside Frank's hospital room. "But he can't continue working at the same pace. At his age, this is a warning that needs to be taken seriously." Maria nodded, her mind already racing through the implications. Frank would need care during his recovery, and the ranch work couldn't stop. The animals needed daily attention, and winter preparations had to be completed. For the first time since arriving at Rolling Hills Ranch, Maria felt the familiar weight of overwhelming responsibility settling on her shoulders. That evening, she sat with her children in Frank's hospital room, watching their grandfather sleep peacefully under medical monitoring. The children were frightened, having experienced the trauma of losing their father and now facing the possibility of losing their beloved Papa Frank. "Is he going to die like Daddy?" Elena whispered, tears streaming down her small face. "No, Mija," Maria said firmly, though her own heart was heavy with worry. "Papa Frank is going to get better. The doctors are taking very good care of him." Carlos, ever the responsible oldest child, surprised Maria with his next words. "Mama, I can help more with the ranch work. I know how to feed all the animals, and I've been watching Papa Frank fix fences. We can take care of everything until he's better." Frank's eyes opened then, and he looked at his chosen family gathered around his bedside. "You all don't need to worry about an old man like me," he said weakly. "I've been through worse than this." "Papa Frank, we're not going anywhere," Elena declared with fierce loyalty. "We're your family now, and families take care of each other." Frank felt tears prick his eyes at the determination in these children who had come to mean more to him than he had ever imagined possible. "I know you will, sweetheart. You're the best family a man could ask for." The next few weeks tested all of them in ways they hadn't expected. Maria juggled hospital visits with ranch responsibilities, often working from dawn until late evening to maintain the property and care for the animals. Carlos took on tasks far beyond his years, rising early to help with feeding and demonstrating a maturity that both impressed and worried his mother. Elena became the family's emotional anchor, reading stories to Frank during visits and creating cheerful artwork to decorate his hospital room. Miguel appointed himself Frank's personal entertainer, performing elaborate stories about the ranch animals' daily adventures that never failed to make his grandfather laugh. The local community rallied around them in ways that deeply moved Maria. Neighbors she barely knew appeared at the ranch offering help with heavy work. The local feed store delivered supplies without being asked and refused to accept immediate payment. Dr. Rodriguez stopped by regularly to check on both Frank's recovery and the family's well-being. "This is what small communities do," explained Betty Morrison, Frank's sister-in-law, who had driven from 2 towns over to help with cooking and cleaning. "Frank has been part of this area for over 40 years. When he needs help, we all pitch in." But it was during Frank's 3rd week in the hospital that the crisis deepened unexpectedly. A severe early winter storm struck the region, bringing heavy snow and dangerous cold temperatures. The ranch's heating system, which Frank had been planning to repair, finally failed completely. Maria found herself alone with 3 children in a house with no heat, while outside temperatures dropped below freezing. The barn animals needed constant attention to prevent water sources from freezing, and the generator that powered the well pump was acting unreliably. For a moment, sitting in the cold kitchen with her children huddled around a small space heater, Maria felt the crushing weight of being completely overwhelmed. Carlos found her crying quietly at the kitchen table after the younger children had gone to bed. "Mama, are you okay?" "Just tired, Mijo," Maria said, wiping her eyes quickly. "I think Papa Frank would want us to call for help," Carlos said with wisdom that seemed far beyond his 8 years. "He always says there's no shame in asking for help when you really need it." Maria looked at her son's serious face and realized he was right. Pride had kept her from reaching out, but Frank had taught them that accepting help was part of building community and relationships. The next morning, she swallowed her independence and called Betty Morrison. Within hours, trucks began arriving at Rolling Hills Ranch. Men from surrounding properties brought space heaters and helped repair the heating system. Women from the community arrived with hot meals and extra blankets. Betty Morrison moved into the guest room temporarily, providing an extra pair of experienced hands and emotional support. "You're not alone in this," Betty told Maria as they worked together preparing dinner for the volunteer helpers. "Frank chose you as family, which means we all did too. That's how it works out here." Frank was released from the hospital 2 days before Christmas week but determined to be home with his family for the holiday. Dr. Rodriguez had approved his discharge with strict instructions for limited activity and regular monitoring, but Frank's joy at returning to Rolling Hills Ranch was evident in every careful step he took around his beloved property. The children had decorated the house with handmade ornaments and drawings, creating a celebration that focused on gratitude rather than expensive gifts. Under the Christmas tree sat simple presents they had crafted for each other: Carlos's woodworking projects, Elena's artwork, Miguel's collection of interesting rocks he had found around the ranch. Christmas morning arrived crisp and bright, with snow covering the ranch in pristine white. As the family gathered around the tree, Frank pulled out an envelope he had hidden despite his recent health crisis. Inside were official adoption papers he had been quietly preparing with his lawyer for months. "I know these papers don't change anything real between us," Frank said, his voice trembling with emotion. "But I wanted to make it official. You three are my grandchildren in my heart, and, Maria, you're like the daughter Sarah and I never had. If something happens to me, I want to be sure this ranch becomes your home permanently." Maria gasped, reading the documents that would legally establish Frank as the children's grandfather and designate her as inheritor of Rolling Hills Ranch. It was a gesture of trust and love that took her breath away. "Papa Frank," Elena said solemnly, "you're not going anywhere. We won't let you." As they sat together in the warm living room, watching snow fall gently outside the windows, Frank felt a peace he hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. This family had healed his loneliness and given him a reason to wake up each morning with enthusiasm. In return, he had provided them with security and unconditional love. The ranch animals seemed to sense the joy in the house. Buttercup whinnied softly from her stall, the chickens clucked contentedly in their warming coop, and even the barn cats gathered near the house as if drawn to participate in the celebration. Rolling Hills Ranch had fulfilled its destiny as a place where love grew stronger than any challenge, where families were created through choice rather than just biology, and where the simple acts of daily caring created bonds that would last forever. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Rolling Hills Ranch as Maria Santos pulled her old pickup truck through the rusted gates. Dust clouds followed behind her beaten vehicle, creating a golden haze in the early light. She had driven 3 hours from the city with her 3 children cramped in the cab, their belongings stuffed into garbage bags in the truck bed. Everything they owned in the world fit in that small space. 8-year-old Carlos pressed his face against the passenger window, watching the endless fields stretch toward distant mountains. His younger sister Elena, only 6, clutched a worn stuffed rabbit while 4-year-old Miguel slept against his mother's shoulder. Maria's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as doubt crept into her thoughts. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she should have stayed in the city, even with the eviction notice and empty refrigerator. The ranch house came into view, a sprawling wooden structure that had seen better days. Paint peeled from the siding, and the front porch sagged slightly on one side. But smoke curled from the chimney, and flower boxes beneath the windows showed someone cared enough to plant bright yellow marigolds. Maria parked near the front steps and took a deep breath. An elderly man emerged from the house, his weathered face creased by decades of sun and wind. Frank Morrison moved slowly but purposefully, his gray hair hidden beneath a faded cowboy hat. He had run Rolling Hills Ranch for 43 years, raising cattle and horses while his late wife Sarah tended a garden that fed half the county. Now, at 72, he lived alone in the big house, rattling around rooms that once echoed with laughter and family dinners. Frank had placed the advertisement in the city newspaper on impulse. Ranch work available. Housing provided. family welcome. He told himself he needed help with the animals and property maintenance. Deep down, he knew he was lonely and missed the sound of children's voices. When Maria called from a payphone outside a homeless shelter, her voice shaking with desperation and hope, Frank felt something stir in his chest that had been quiet for too long. "You must be Maria," Frank said, approaching the truck with a slight smile. His voice carried the gentle authority of someone who had spent his life working with both animals and people. "Welcome to Rolling Hills." Maria stepped out of the truck, smoothing her wrinkled clothes nervously. She had worn her best outfit, a simple blue dress and cardigan, hoping to make a good impression. The children tumbled out behind her, Carlos immediately scanning the horizon for signs of horses or cattle, while Elena hid behind her mother's legs. "Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Morrison," Maria said, her slight accent coloring her careful English. "I promise we will work very hard. My children are good kids. They won't cause any trouble." Frank's eyes softened as he looked at the small family. He saw exhaustion in Maria's posture, the weight of worry that single mothers carry when they are running out of options. The children looked thin but clean, their clothes mended carefully and their hair neatly combed despite their long journey. "No need for promises yet," Frank said gently. "Let me show you around first. Then, we can talk about what needs doing." He led them toward the barn, a massive red structure that dominated the ranch's center. Inside, the air smelled of hay and leather, sweet and earthy. Carlos gasped with delight as he saw horses in the stalls, their heads poking out to investigate the newcomers. Elena's shyness melted away when a gentle mare with a white blaze stretched her neck toward the little girl's outstretched hand. "This is Buttercup," Frank explained, watching Elena's face light up. "She's getting old like me, but she's still the sweetest horse on the ranch. Been here almost as long as I have." Miguel woke up fully for the first time since leaving the city, clapping his hands and pointing at everything with wide-eyed wonder. Frank found himself smiling more than he had in months as he watched the children's reactions to the animals and open spaces. "The chickens are out back," Frank continued, leading them through the barn to a large fenced yard where dozens of hens pecked and scratched in the dirt. "They lay enough eggs to keep us fed and sell some in town. The vegetable garden is beyond that fence. Sarah always said good food starts with good soil." Maria nodded, taking in every detail. She had grown up on her grandmother's small farm in Mexico before her family moved to the United States when she was 12. The familiar sights and smells brought back memories of simpler times, before her husband's death in a construction accident 2 years ago left her struggling to survive in an expensive city with no family support. "What kind of work would I be doing?" Maria asked as they walked toward a smaller building that Frank explained was the equipment shed. "General ranch maintenance," Frank replied. "Feeding animals, cleaning stalls, mending fences. Some cooking and housekeeping if you're willing. Nothing too difficult, but it's steady work that needs doing every day." Frank paused and looked at the children, who were chasing chickens around the yard with delighted laughter. "The school bus stops at the end of the driveway. Good school district here. The kids would have their own rooms in the ranch house. There's a big kitchen where Sarah used to cook for the whole family." Maria felt tears prick her eyes. After months of staying in shelters and sleeping in the truck, the idea of her children having their own rooms felt like an impossible dream. "What about wages, Mr. Morrison?" "Room and board for the family, plus $400 a week to start," Frank said simply. "More if things work out well. There's a small medical clinic in town, and Dr. Rodriguez speaks Spanish if you need anything." The amount was modest, but, combined with free housing and food, it represented security Maria hadn't felt in 2 years. More importantly, she sensed genuine kindness in this weathered rancher who was offering her family a chance at stability. "When would you want us to start?" Maria asked, hardly daring to hope. "Well," Frank said, glancing at the children who were now sitting in a circle feeding chickens from their hands, "it's getting late, and you've had a long drive. Why don't you stay tonight, and we'll see how things feel in the morning." That evening, Frank showed them to the guest rooms on the ranch house's second floor. Each room was simply furnished but clean and comfortable, with handmade quilts on the beds and windows that looked out over rolling pastures. Maria tucked her children into real beds for the first time in months, listening to their excited whispers about horses and chickens and the kind old man who had welcomed them. Later, Maria sat on the front porch with Frank, watching stars appear in the clear country sky. The city had never offered such peaceful moments, such vast quiet broken only by the gentle sounds of animals settling for the night. "Why did you really place that advertisement?" Maria asked softly. Frank was quiet for a long moment, rocking slowly in his wooden chair. "Lost my Sarah 3 years ago," he finally said. "Been trying to run this place alone since then. Getting harder every year." He paused, his voice growing softer. "Truth is, this ranch was built for families. Sarah and I never had children of our own, but we raised my sister's kids after she passed. House has been too quiet without little voices." Maria understood. She had seen the loneliness in Frank's eyes, the careful way he had watched her children's delight with the animals. This was about more than hiring ranch help. This was about healing, for both of them. "My children have been through a lot," Maria said. "Their father's death, losing our apartment, uncertainty about everything. They need stability." "Children are resilient," Frank replied. "But they need to feel safe and wanted. That's what this ranch has always been about." Inside the house, Carlos lay in his new bed staring at the ceiling, hardly believing they might actually stay in this magical place. Elena had already named 3 chickens and planned to teach Buttercup new tricks. Miguel slept deeply, the first peaceful sleep he had enjoyed in months. Frank and Maria continued talking until late into the night, sharing stories of loss and hope, of the challenges of raising children and maintaining land. They discovered they both valued hard work, honesty, and the importance of family bonds. Most importantly, they sensed in each other the possibility of building something meaningful together. The next morning dawned bright and clear, with Maria waking to the sound of roosters crowing and her children's excited voices drifting up from the kitchen. She found them already dressed and helping Frank prepare breakfast, Carlos carefully scrambling eggs while Elena set the table with serious concentration. "Mama, can we stay forever?" Elena asked, her dark eyes shining with hope. Maria looked around the warm kitchen, at her children's animated faces and Frank's gentle smile, and felt something shift in her chest. For the first time in years, she could envision a future filled with possibility rather than fear. "We'll see, Mija," she said softly. "We'll see." Frank caught her eye over the children's heads and nodded slightly. Some decisions made themselves, and, looking at this family transforming his quiet house into a home again, he knew they belonged here. The paperwork could wait. What mattered was the feeling of rightness that filled the old ranch house, the sense that healing was possible for all of them. Outside, Buttercup whinnied softly in her stall, as if welcoming the new voices that would soon become as familiar as the changing seasons. Rolling Hills Ranch was about to become what it had always been meant to be, a place where love grew alongside the crops, where hard work and determination created something lasting, and where families found their way home to each other.